A pistol pressed to the captain's head, a grenade pin clenched between teeth, 153 passengers trapped at 28,000 feet. In June 1985, TWA Flight 847 became the longest hijacking in history. 17 days, 5 countries, 1 murder, and a confrontation that would bring a superpower to its knees. June 14, 1985, Trans World Airlines Flight 847 lifts off from Athens bound for Rome. 20 minutes into the flight, a flight attendant hears screaming from the rear cabin. When she pulls back the curtain, a man charges toward her, kicks her to the ground, and drags her toward the cockpit. Behind him, another man grips a pistol and clutches a grenade pin between his teeth. Before she can alert the pilots, both men smash through the cockpit door and pistol whip the crew. One presses his weapon against the captain's head and demands he change course. Destination: Beirut, Lebanon. The hijackers are Muhammad Ali Hamadi, 21, and Hassan Izz-al-Din, 22. Both Hezbollah fighters with a single demand: release 766 Lebanese prisoners held by Israel. Flight 847 presented an ideal opportunity. The aircraft had arrived from Cairo and was continuing from Athens to Rome, then Boston, with Los Angeles as its final destination. This routing meant most passengers aboard were American citizens, exactly the leverage needed to capture Washington's attention and pressure Israel. Security screening at Athens airport was notoriously lax for connecting flights, sometimes skipped entirely. The 3 hijackers entered through the transit lounge carrying briefcases containing 2 9mm handguns and a grenade, concealed with fiberglass insulation that fooled the detectors. As they prepared to board, a security officer waved a metal detector over Hamadi and Izz-al-Din. The alarm sounded. Both men froze, certain they'd been caught. They raised their hands in surrender, but the officer suspected nothing. He simply instructed them to empty their pockets and pass through again. This time they set their briefcases down. The scanner found nothing, and both were waved through. Behind them, however, an airport employee informed Atwa that he couldn't board. The flight was completely full. Hamadi and Izz-al-Din took seats in the aircraft's final row. Atwa never appeared. When the pilot announced departure, the 2 remaining hijackers faced a critical decision: abandon the mission or proceed with just the 2 of them. 20 minutes after takeoff, Hamadi and Izz-al-Din retrieved their weapons and began threatening passengers. Uli Derrickson, the flight service manager, heard commotion from the rear cabin. When she opened the curtain to investigate, Hamadi sprinted toward her and delivered a flying kick to her chest. He dragged her to the cockpit, and together the 2 hijackers kicked in the door. Inside sat Captain John Testruck, a pilot with 3 decades of experience, along with his first officer and flight engineer. They were powerless to resist. At approximately 10:30 in the morning, 28,000 feet above the Mediterranean, the hijackers seized control and ordered Captain Testruck to divert to Beirut. The hijackers commanded all 153 passengers to relocate. Men to window seats, women on the aisles, everyone with hands behind heads and elbows on knees. Lebanon was the hijackers' homeland, but choosing Beirut was strategically calculated. The country's central government had collapsed, and the capital was carved up among rival militias, including Hezbollah. No unified Lebanese authority could coordinate with American rescue forces. Even if U.S. commandos reached Beirut, Hezbollah controlled the airport perimeter. However, when Captain Testruck radioed their destination, Beirut's control tower refused landing permission. They blocked the runway with buses and barricades. The hijackers remained determined, knowing they held the upper hand. Hamadi ordered Derrickson to identify Jewish passengers aboard. She refused. He threatened her, but she knew neither hijacker spoke much English. Hamadi spoke German, and so did she. They needed her as translator, and she absolutely refused to cooperate. Hamadi searched passports himself, relocating passengers with Jewish-sounding names to first class and assaulting them as he found them. He also discovered 6 U.S. Navy divers among the passengers. As the aircraft approached Beirut, the control tower still refused clearance. Captain Testruck transmitted a desperate message. The hijacker had pulled a grenade pin and would detonate if denied landing. Still, they refused. Testrake announced he was landing regardless, fuel be damned. The Lebanese finally relented. Flight 847 touched down in Beirut at 11:57 in the morning. On the ground, the hijackers issued demands: 200 sandwiches, 150 apples, 88 pounds of bananas. But fuel came first. The plane was rigged with explosives, they warned. Any approach would trigger detonation. Airport officials refused to comply without hostage releases. The hijackers wouldn't budge. Derrickson had cultivated rapport with her captors, offering tea and food, even singing German songs. She requested release of all women and children. Denied. She asked again for elderly women and children. Denied. She asked a third time. They agreed. 17 elderly women and 2 children slid down the emergency chute to freedom. The hijackers understood that every minute on the ground gave American intelligence more time to plan a rescue. The airport was delaying their fuel. They dragged 2 Navy divers to the cockpit area, tore an armrest from the flight engineer's seat, and began beating them savagely. Captain Testrake pleaded over the radio. "They're beating passengers, threatening to kill them. We need fuel immediately." Hours passed before refueling finally began. When Derrickson attempted to bandage the injured men, the hijackers stopped her. "Americans must suffer," they declared. While refueling continued, Captain Testrake informed the tower the hijackers wanted the runway cleared for dawn takeoff. Asked for their destination, he replied, "I don't know." Though Hezbollah offered protection in Beirut, remaining there risked Israeli or American commando raids. Once airborne, the hijackers ordered a course for Algiers. Algeria had earned a reputation as neutral mediator in Middle Eastern hostage situations. They believed Algeria would provide safe haven and broker negotiations. But as they approached, Algeria closed its airport. Only after President Reagan personally contacted Algeria's president was landing permitted. The hijackers touched down around 3:30 that afternoon and formally announced their demands: release of 766 Lebanese prisoners from Israel, release of 17 men involved in the Kuwait embassy bombing, complete Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon, and international condemnation of both Israel and America. While Algerian officials relayed demands to world governments, the hijackers negotiated 22 more hostage releases in exchange for fuel. But even after releasing them, airport officials refused to refuel without payment. Trans World Airlines had no account with Shell Oil in Algiers. The aircraft was stranded. The hijackers turned violent again. Searching passenger belongings, Hamadi discovered a diplomatic passport. A U.S. government official was somewhere aboard. The passport belonged to Kurt Carlson, a 41-year-old Army Reserve major returning from routine work in Cairo. Hamadi ordered passengers to identify the owner. Silence. He threatened severe consequences for whoever possessed this passport if they didn't reveal themselves before he found them. When no one responded, both hijackers moved through the aisle row by row, comparing faces to the passport photograph, weapons aimed at each passenger. Carlson remained silent until they reached the row behind him. He had no choice but to stand. Hamadi pressed the pistol against his forehead. "CIA or FBI?" he demanded. "Army Reserve," Carlson answered. Hamadi stared into his eyes for several seconds until Derrickson slipped between them. He lowered the weapon and instead dragged Carlson to the cockpit area, where they blindfolded him and began beating him with the same armrest used on the Navy divers. Captain Testrake begged airport officials for fuel. They insisted on payment. Derrickson intervened again, demanding the hijackers stop hitting passengers. This time, they ignored her. Testrake promised the U.S. Embassy would pay for the fuel and even put his microphone as close as he could to Carlson so the tower could hear his screams. But the airport officials still refused. For nearly 4 hours, the hijackers brutalized Carlson. They finally dragged him to the open aircraft door, pressed guns to his head, and threatened to execute one passenger every 5 minutes until fuel arrived. The airport still demanded payment. Derrickson could bear no more. She retrieved her personal credit card and paid $5,500 for 6,000 gallons of fuel. With the aircraft finally refueled, the beating stopped. But Algeria offered nothing else, no asylum, no pressure on Israel. Hours after landing, the hijackers ordered Captain Testrake back to Beirut. Despite the risk of American or Israeli raids, only there did they have Hezbollah's protection. During the return flight, Carlson asked Derrickson to tell Hamadi about his wife and baby daughter waiting at home. The hijackers' response was unexpected. He embraced Carlson, apologized, offered water. He explained he too had a wife and daughter, but they'd died in Israeli and American airstrikes on southern Lebanon. His brother as well. The moment of compassion vanished quickly. Worried passengers might stop fearing them, the hijackers selected Robert Stetham, one of the Navy divers they'd already brutalized. They dragged him to first class, tore his shirt into strips for a blindfold, bound his hands with suitcase cords, and positioned him at the cockpit door. They beat him relentlessly, holding the microphone to his face, wanting passengers to hear him scream. Incredibly, no matter how severe the assault, Stetham never made a sound. As the aircraft approached Beirut, the control tower again denied landing, switching off runway lights. Testrake pleaded. The situation was desperate, fuel nearly exhausted, nowhere else to land. Still refused. One hijacker grabbed the radio and screamed, "Let us land or we crash the plane." Beirut had no choice but to illuminate the runway. Flight 847 landed in Beirut for the second time around 2:20 in the morning. The hijackers knew they couldn't continue alone. Though Hezbollah dominated Beirut, they lacked negotiating infrastructure. The Amal movement, another Shiite militia with greater resources, could help. Both groups wanted Israeli prisoners freed, despite their complicated rivalry. The hijackers demanded fuel and an Amal official. Both requests were ignored, so they brought Stetham back to the cockpit, beating him again, trying to force screams into the radio. Again, he remained silent. Then Izz al-Din gave an order. Hamadi dragged Stetham to the aircraft door, opened it, and fired. Stetham's body fell to the tarmac. A second shot followed. The captain transmitted, "He just killed a passenger. There will be another in 5 minutes." Immediately, the hijackers grabbed another Navy diver and began beating him. Derrickson tried intervening, but couldn't stop them. Only when an Amal official and his bodyguard approached did they pause. Once these men boarded, the hijackers ordered runway lights extinguished. Under darkness, a dozen Hezbollah fighters infiltrated the airport and boarded with additional weapons and ammunition. Some departed with 7 American passengers bearing Jewish-sounding names, taking them to a Hezbollah-controlled prison. These 7 became insurance. The remaining passengers were bargaining chips. Only then did the hijackers permit the Red Cross to retrieve Stetham's body, which had lain on the tarmac for over 2 hours. Then they ordered another flight to Algiers. The operation was designed for 3 men. When the flight proved full, Ali Atwa couldn't board in Athens. He'd attempted to force his way aboard and was arrested, his weapons discovered. Once news of the hijacking broke, Greek authorities connected him immediately. Before departing Beirut, the hijackers transmitted a warning. They would execute 1 Greek hostage for every hour Atwa remained imprisoned. Greece immediately flew Atwa to Algiers for official negotiations. When the reinforced hijacking team arrived that morning, Algeria permitted landing on condition of no further violence. 2 Algerian officials boarded to negotiate. Neither Israel nor America would meet any demands. Secretly, the Reagan administration was assembling a strike force in Italy for potential rescue. The U.S. ambassador in Algeria sent Washington an urgent message. Under no circumstances attempt forcible rescue. The Algerians would resist, the hijackers would detonate, everyone would die. Eventually, the hijackers agreed to release 65 passengers and all 5 female crew members, including Uli Derrickson, in exchange for Atwa joining them for their final return to Beirut. On June 16th, the hijackers and 39 remaining hostages landed at Beirut International. Negotiations failed. The following day, Reagan dispatched an aircraft carrier and guided missile destroyer to Lebanon's coast. Marines awaiting rescue orders. But before they could arrive, the hijackers executed a devastating countermove. A few hijackers remained aboard with the cockpit crew. All other hostages were removed from the aircraft and dispersed throughout Hezbollah-controlled Beirut neighborhoods. Even if Marines rescued hostages from one location, others would die elsewhere. Simultaneously, Hezbollah transferred some captives to Nabi Berri, leader of the Amal movement. Despite their rivalry, both groups wanted Israeli prisoners freed, so they cooperated. Berri transformed from mediator to primary negotiator. Washington had to deal with him to recover hostages. His price: more than 700 Lebanese Shiites imprisoned in Israel. The Reagan administration realized ground operations were impossible. They ordered the Navy to hold position offshore, threatening bombardment if any more Americans were harmed. Hezbollah had neutralized the world's most powerful military. On June 18th, President Reagan addressed the nation. 1 hour earlier, he announced, Navy diver Robert Dean Stethem's body had returned to American soil in a coffin, beaten and shot at point-blank range. America was under attack by international terrorists who killed wantonly and held innocent citizens prisoner. Reagan declared America would never make concessions to terrorists. Yet with hostages scattered across Beirut, rescue was impossible. That same day, Berri released 3 Greek hostages, demonstrating he could end the crisis whenever he chose, provided his demands were met. An open invitation to negotiate, Israel and America refused. The following day, ABC News conducted an exclusive interview with Captain Testrake on the airport runway. Asked about rescue operations, Testrake replied they'd all be dead men. They were surrounded by guards constantly. The interview broadcast worldwide, confirming hostages were dispersed and military intervention impossible. Berri recognized media pressure was mounting. The next day at the airport, he presented 5 American hostages for cameras. One declared, "We pray the governments involved can set aside fear, anger, and insult to rectify wrongs committed." It wasn't just Berri demanding negotiations. The hostages themselves were pleading. But the terms remained absolute: all 766 Shiite prisoners, nothing less. Israel announced willingness to consider the trade, but only if America made a public request. The Reagan administration refused, yet pressure mounted relentlessly. Though they'd never admit it publicly, American officials were already seeking ways to end the crisis, even if it meant bending their own rules. On June 23rd, 10 days after the initial hijacking, Israel released 31 Lebanese prisoners. Berri rejected partial deals, demanding all prisoners freed and American warships withdrawn from Lebanese waters. While America conducted secret negotiations, Berri kept leveraging media. On June 27th, ABC interviewed 3 more hostages. The following day, 14 more. Berri announced he believed resolution would come within 48 hours. Without public statements from America or Israel, reports from Beirut on June 29th claimed a United Nations official had negotiated prisoner releases, conditioned on America promising no retaliation against Lebanon. By June 30th, agreement was reached. Israel would free remaining Lebanese Shiite prisoners 1 month after Berri released the hostages. America could claim they'd negotiated with the United Nations, not with terrorists. After 17 grueling days, all 39 remaining American hostages were collected from locations throughout Beirut and transported to Syria for return home. 2 days later, Reagan held a ceremony celebrating their freedom. He addressed Stethem's death directly. "We will not forget what was done to him. There will be no forgetting. His murderers must be brought to justice." Following the hijacking, Hamadi, Izz al-Din, and Atwa vanished into Beirut, where no military force could reach them. They wouldn't remain hidden forever. 3 years later, Izz al-Din participated in the 16-day hijacking of Kuwait Airways Flight 422 across 3 continents. He escaped. The following year, Hamadi was captured in Frankfurt carrying liquid explosives. America sought extradition, where he'd face the death penalty. But Hamadi's brother kidnapped 2 German citizens in Beirut. Germany chose to try him under their own laws. In 1989, Hamadi received life imprisonment for murder, air piracy, and hostage-taking. He was released on parole 16 years later and returned to Lebanon, beyond American jurisdiction. By 2006, all three hijackers appeared on the FBI's most wanted list, $5 million rewards offered for information leading to arrest. None were ever captured. In 2021, reports indicated Ali Atwa had died of cancer. In 2025, 40 years after the hijacking, reports suggested Hamadi was shot outside his home. Lebanese authorities released no official information and identified no suspects. Today, both Hamadi and Izzeldin remain on the FBI's wanted list with $5 million rewards. The longest hijacking in history ended with hostages freed, but justice for Robert Stetham remains incomplete.